I'm John Phillips, and this is Next Generation Today. We have a lot to discuss today, including the latest on the mall attack in Kenya and what one 4-year-old boy dramatically said when he came face-to-face with one of his attackers. Plus, Cory Booker's big imagination. Tony Katz, host of the Tony Katz radio show, will join us to discuss the drama, and there's a lot of it, more drama than TNT, surrounding this mayor of Newark, New Jersey. And crack cocaine. It's what one person used to try to pay a utility bill. Talk about Breaking Bad. Joining me today from Washington, D.C. is a woman who has never used crack cocaine to try to pay one of her bills. Next Generation TV correspondent Michelle Fields. And joining me in studio here in Los Angeles is a woman who likes to barter, but not with cocaine. Yeah. Tammy Bruce, host of the Tammy Bruce radio show, which you can get online at tammybruce.com. And Tammy, we'll start with you.
Alrighty, well, boy, talk about dramatic. A 4-year-old British boy came face-to-face with one of the attackers behind that deadly takeover of a mall in Kenya. Elliot Pryor stood up to the gunman to protect his sister and his mother. The 4-year-old called him a very bad man. And the gunman then gave him some chocolate bars, spared his life, said, "We're not really monsters." And he spared the life of his mom and of his sister. And his mom got shot in the leg, and she's going to survive. But the attacker, according to reports of the witnesses there and to the boy and to everybody else, was the attacker was shocked that he was confronted. And obviously, the boy using shame. And this is one of those things that we don't see. Look, you've got a 4-year-old little boy accomplishing more than Barack Obama, more than anybody in Congress, more than anyone in leadership in the world, by simply standing up and shaming a man who even a 4-year-old knew was bad. And this attacker, who we now believe hopefully is dead, was in fact shocked and let them all go and gave them Mars bars. And it's amazing what can happen when you shame somebody, isn't it? Well,
that kid is never going to have to follow a bedtime for the rest of his life.
I'll tell you, amazing. Yeah. He stood up and was trying to defend his sister, and his mom had already been shot. And you can see there's a picture of this little boy with his family as they're running out. He still looks mad. This 4-year-old looks really mad.
Well, he reminded us something that all of us know, but it's difficult to do when you're confronted with a traumatic situation, and that is you always have to stand up to bullies.
Right.
And if you think about what happened on the flight that crashed over Shanksville, Pennsylvania on 9/11, those passengers knew what these bullies were trying to do. They knew they were headed towards the U.S. Congress or the White House or some very sensitive part of the American government, of the American experience. Mm-hmm. And so they took that plane down heroically in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. They stood up to the bullies. That's what this kid did.
You know, Michelle, we also know, of course, there is the end result of Shanksville was not good. When it came to everyone, of course, perished and gave up their lives to save other people. Do you think that on one hand, of course, this was incredibly brave and courageous, but there's always a lot at risk? I think the worldwide attitude is don't confront these people because it will get worse. We've heard that in America over and over and over again, is that it'll cause terrorism if we defend ourselves. Do you think this is a good example, especially, Lord knows, for young people, or is it dangerous?
You know, I think it's a bit dangerous. If I was confronted in that situation, I don't think I'd be brave enough to confront the person. But I commend the little kid, and it's an amazing story. He's a very brave person who obviously loves his family, and I think this is just a great story.
You know, this is why I have hope for the world. I really do. I have hope for the world because that's a 4-year-old little. I think the family was British. And they were speaking English,
yeah.
But that's what gives me hope for the world when you got little kids like that.
Well, look, when I was a 4-year-old, I was jumping off big high-dive diving boards, which I would never do today. I did a bunch of stuff that I'm now terrified of. When you're that young,
you just go on TV.
When you're that young, you don't know enough to be afraid. And sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes that's a bad thing. Yeah. That's why we don't let them drive until they're 16, because they don't know when they should be afraid of something.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, Michelle, you're up.
All right. Well, Ted Cruz enters the record books with a 21-hour-long filibuster in his attempt to defund Obamacare. So he held the floor for 21 hours straight, the fourth longest filibuster in Senate history. He wants to stop the spending bill as it includes a provision defunding Obamacare. Cruz says that Democrats have rigged the rules to be able to strip out the health care law language with a majority vote, rather than the 60-vote threshold that's often required. So let's take a listen to Cruz in action.
Every day, the headlines come in. More jobs lost, more people losing their health insurance, more premiums going up, more people pushed into part-time work. Because it is a job-killing, economy-destroying, health-care ruining, debt-exploding, out-of-control government mess. I would not like them here or there. I would not like them anywhere. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them. Sam, I am. Every one of us, we owe it to our constituents to listen to the young people who are suffering, to listen to the single moms who aren't getting jobs, who are getting forcibly put into part-time work. I'll tell you, I would be perfectly happy if not a single story coming out of this ever mentioned my name. The only path, if we're going to oppose Obamacare, is to stand together.
The hour of noon have arrived pursuant to the order. The Senate will be in order.
He looked pretty good for 21 hours. I mean, if you remember when Rand Paul did the filibuster, he looked really exhausted. Ted Cruz looked pretty good. But let me throw it to you guys. You know, a lot of liberals are coming out there and saying this is Ted Cruz just trying to put it and make it all about himself, that this wasn't a real filibuster, this wasn't going to stop Obamacare, this was just him trying to take the limelight. Do you agree with that, or do you think that this is sort of starting a national conversation and that it's a good thing?
You know, it's so funny because when that woman in Texas was doing her filibuster over the abortion bill, which also had no impact, she was a hero to the liberals. I think it highlights their hypocrisy.
Yes.
I do think that this is a great part of the system, is that whatever your issue is, you're able to get up there and expound on it. The founders wanted it to be that way. Ted Cruz did a great job. He's reminding us about what's at stake. And look, when this hits on October 1st, and everyone says, oh, this is going to ruin the Republicans and ruin Ted Cruz, people are going to remember this warning, this very public warning, and Ted Cruz is going to be a hero because we know it. This is not guesswork about what's happening. He wasn't being Miss Cleo out there. He was talking about what's already occurring. So the liberals clearly are hypocrites in this regard. It's a great part of the system, and I think Cruz did a great job with it.
Well, the media and liberals are always going to be hypocritical about these sort of things because they're in the tank for the other side, and every opportunity they have to remind us of that, they take it, and that's just who they are. That's who they are, and that's what they do. Looking at the political strategy of what Ted Cruz did here and where the Republicans are headed towards the midterm elections, I don't know if it's the smartest strategy. And I've always followed the philosophy, when your opponents are committing suicide, don't try to commit homicide. Don't try to go in there and kill them. And the fact of the matter is that the approval numbers for Obamacare are bad. They have always been bad. And the Democrats are playing road games in the midterm elections. They got to win in places like Alaska, in Arkansas, in Louisiana, in Montana, places that are going to be tough seats for them to hold on to regardless. But when you've got Obamacare to defend, it's virtually impossible. What the Republicans have done with Ted Cruz and with the proposed government shutdown is they've taken one issue where the public hates more than Obamacare, and they've married themselves to it. And I just think politically, just stand back and just let the Democrats self-destruct. And it put out a good field of candidates, make sure we have strong candidates, and win these elections.
What Cruz is doing, though, the problem with that is that as the Democrats self-destruct, it's like a car bomb. You're going to have a lot of collateral damage. I think what Cruz is trying to do, Michelle, maybe you'd agree with this, is to, even though it might be politically better for the Republicans to let Obamacare happen because it is destroying people's lives, I think that there's the effort to stop it before it does that, for the sake of the average individual. Michelle, do you think that's what Ted Cruz is trying to do, is looking at the impact on the average American and trying to slow that down or stop it, versus the political benefit of letting this monster loose in America?
I'm a bit cynical when it comes to politics. I think that this entire strategy is bad for the Republican Party as a whole, but I think that this filibuster, if you can call it that, was really good for Ted Cruz, because what it did is, first off, it showed his debating skills. He looked great out there. He could stand up there for over 20 hours and be fabulous. I mean, he wasn't saying any he just sounded great. That's good for a presidential contender. And then it also humanized him. He talked about his children. He talked about reading to his children. He told stories about his father. I think when it comes to donors and to voters, this is great for him and for 2016 for him, because it really put him out there as someone who's standing up for the American people. But it's not as if this is going to stop Obamacare. I think that I agree with John. We should just let it go, and the American people will see that this is bad and they'll blame Democrats.
One thing the Republicans are doing,
no,
Michelle, one thing the Republicans are doing, which maybe they wouldn't have done in the first place, is they've got this option of doing the delay of the individual mandate, which I don't think they would have had the energy or the compulsion to do if they weren't competing with
Here's
Cruz.
the problem with that, though. If the Republicans work to mitigate the damage that Obamacare is going to do, people are going to say, oh, Obamacare, it's not that big a deal, it's just a small change.
Yeah.
But if you let the damage happen...
That's what they're going to say.
Right. Yeah, it's just, it's much ado about nothing.
Right,
if you let the damage happen and then you come in and you say, you got to repeal this monstrosity, you got to take the whole thing off the books, and oh, look, we just elected a bunch of new Republicans in the U.S. Senate, I think then you can go in and just gut it. And it's so damaging, I think you've just got to gut the whole thing.
Well, so maybe the best scenario was what's happened is that Ted Cruz has outlined how awful this is. They're not going to shut down the government. They're going to pass it. It will be a monster, and everyone will remember that a Republican warned them at the very last moment. Maybe that's the best case scenario.
Could be. Time will tell.
I agree with sort of what Scott Walker said, which is focus more on the midterm elections and make sure you get a lot of people in there who are openly and aggressively against Obamacare. That is the best strategy.
And now on to my top story. Nakula, otherwise known as PJ Tobacco, the man who created an anti-Muslim film that was blamed by the State Department for violence in parts of the Middle East, will soon be a free man. The 56-year-old California man will be released from federal custody in a separate case. He had been at a Southern California halfway house since May, and PJ Tobacco says he wrote the script for the film Innocence of Muslims. The film depicts Mohammed as a religious fraud, a pedophile, and a womanizer. Sounds like a few of the presidents that we've had. Let's go ahead and take a look at the video.
My age has exceeded 120 years. And in all my young life, I have not seen such a murderous thug as Mohammed. He kills men, captures women and children, robs the caravans, breaches agreements and treaties. He sells the children as slaves after he and his men have used them. And what's more, he does this all in the name of God. What God is this that is such an oppressor and so unfair to the people?
Oh my God.
It's good to see that Cloris Leachman found work.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, Tammy, this guy went to jail after the State Department blamed him for the violence in the Middle East, including the attacks on our embassy in Benghazi. We all know that's not the truth. We all know that was a fabrication from Hillary Clinton and the Obama administration and people from the top down. But this guy was in jail for a long time because they wanted to send a message to the rest of the world, we're going to make sure to punish this guy. And this guy was a political prisoner, wasn't he?
Well, ostensibly he was put in jail for violating some parts of his parole on another issue, which kept him, he wasn't supposed to use the internet. Bottom line is, though, without him being blamed for this, he never would have been in jail.
Right.
We're letting prisoners out now because there is no room, but suddenly we find a guy who makes a YouTube video. We find room in jail for him for a year at least. This has been outrageous. It's been outrageous from the beginning. I don't know what he's going to do. We know already his family had to move either out of California, certainly out of their home. This is certainly fascistic in nature when it comes to what you do to your own citizenry in the name of politics. and if not entirely criminal. I mean, we're still waiting, obviously, all of us, for justice, but it's good he's out. I have a feeling he's probably going to go back in for some other issue, but in this issue, it was inherently unfair, obviously.
Michelle, how about it? Is he a political prisoner in your mind?
Well, yeah, I agree with Tammy. He wouldn't have been in jail if this hadn't come out. And I mean, look at the clip. You know, when they started blaming it right after the Benghazi attack, they started blaming this YouTube video. You looked it up on YouTube, it had like only 1,000 views. And I'm pretty sure there are more offensive things on the internet than just this video. I don't know where they came up with the idea that this video had sparked a protest, but it didn't. And I think, if anything, right now, we should get justice for Benghazi. We should get answers. There's so many questions that we still don't have answers to, and that should be the #1 priority. It should have never been just putting this random person in prison.
You know, I think that the clip we used is probably the most anybody has seen of this ridiculous film, if you want to call it that. Obviously, no one's going to be getting an Oscar for it. So what's interesting is that they've kept the absurdity of this film from everyone, because that alone would have highlighted the ridiculousness of their claims.
It shows you exactly what the government did here. I mean, if making a bad movie could result in you being thrown in prison, then the guy who made Freddie Got Fingered would be facing the death penalty.
Well, and you know, obviously, since then, the Killing Bin Laden movie has come out. There weren't any major problems with that. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of other things have come out. And it's pretty amazing that still so far there's been no one held to account. And that's Darrell Iss's fault. It's the fault of Congress and a nation overall, the political ruling class, that seems to think that these things you can't do anything about because they're worried mostly about politics.